I never thought I'd be the type of person who'd walk out on a $3,000 dinner bill. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston, I was taught to honor my debts and responsibilities. A Morgan always pays what they owe, my father would say. But that night at Le Ciel, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, something inside me finally snapped. After years of being treated like a personal bank account by my own family, I made a choice that would change everything. The evening had started like many others with a text from my sister Vanessa. "Family dinner tonight at 7. Don't be late," it read, followed by the address of a restaurant I couldn't afford on my teacher's salary. But I knew what was expected. I would show up, smile through their cutting remarks, and then quietly hand over my credit card when the check came. It had been this way since my app sold 4 years ago, a modest success that gave me some financial cushion but somehow transformed me into the family ATM. As I pushed open the heavy glass doors of Le Ciel that evening, I had no idea it would be the last time I'd break bread with my family for a very long time. I also had no idea that walking away from that table would be the first step toward reclaiming my life and discovering who my real family was. My hands were trembling as I drove away from the restaurant, the valet's confused expression still fresh in my mind. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see police lights flashing behind me. What kind of person does this? I wondered. What kind of daughter just walks out? "The kind who's been pushed too far," a small voice answered back. "The kind who's finally realized she deserves better." It all began 4 years ago when I sold my educational app to a tech company for $1.2 million. Not billions, not never work again money, but enough to give me security while I continued the teaching career I loved. Before the ink on the contract had dried, before the first deposit hit my account, my phone was already lighting up with congratulatory messages that quickly morphed into requests. "Emma, my brilliant sister," Vanessa had exclaimed over dinner, the night after the news broke. "I always knew you'd be the successful one." She'd squeezed my hand across the table, her diamond wedding ring catching the light. "Listen, Brad and I have been looking at renovating the kitchen, and now seems like the perfect time. Nothing too extravagant, just about $50,000. You wouldn't mind helping out your sister, would you? It's not like you need all that money just for yourself." I remember the sinking feeling in my stomach, the immediate tension in my shoulders. But more than that, I remember nodding. "Let me see what I can do," I'd said, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. Those 7 words would become my mantra over the next 4 years, repeated so often they lost all meaning. First, it was Vanessa's kitchen. Then it was my brother Peter's investment opportunity that needed just $100,000 in capital. Mom's surprise request to pay off her mortgage came next. Dad needed a new car after his unexpected retirement. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered my existence and my phone number. Aunt Melissa needed help with my cousin's college tuition. Uncle Robert's business was just going through a rough patch. I told myself I was being generous, that family helps family, that I was lucky to be in a position to give back to the people who had supported me throughout my life. But had they? As I sat alone in my modest apartment each night, I'd try to remember examples of that support, of them putting me first. The memories were few and far between. Still, I said yes. I always said yes, until tonight, when I finally said nothing at all and simply walked away. The restaurant bathroom had marble countertops and plush hand towels monogrammed with the restaurant's logo. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection as the tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, hollow-eyed and tense, with shoulders permanently hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. I thought about what was waiting for me back at that table. My father, who'd ordered the $500 bottle of wine without a glance at the price. My mother, who'd spent the evening dropping hints about the European river cruise she and her friends were planning. Vanessa and her husband Brad, who'd brought along my teenage niece and nephew, both wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Peter and his new girlfriend, whose name I couldn't remember because she was different from the woman he'd brought to our last family gathering. Aunt Melissa, who'd spent the evening pointedly talking about my cousin Jacob's graduate school applications I was clearly expected to fund. "You're our ATM," Vanessa had joked earlier when I'd raised an eyebrow at their orders. "You'll pay for our party." Everyone had laughed, even my parents, especially my parents. Something had broken inside me in that moment. A dam that had been cracking for years finally gave way, and all I could feel was a cold, rushing clarity. I didn't need to go back out there. I didn't need to hand over my credit card with a smile. I didn't need to drain my account yet again. For people who saw me as nothing more than a convenient source of funds, I could just leave, and so I did. I walked straight past our table, through the restaurant, and out the front door. I tipped the confused valet $20, more than my family had ever tipped anyone, and drove away into the night, leaving them with their expensive wines, their seafood, towers, their laughing entitlement, and their $3,000 bill. Now, as I drove through the darkened streets of Boston, my phone buzzed continuously in my purse on the passenger seat. I knew who it was. I knew what they wanted. But for the first time, in 4 years, I wasn't going to answer. For the first time in 4 years, I wasn't going to solve their problems. The realization made me dizzy with a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. I had no idea what came next. I only knew I couldn't go back. The first call came at 9:47 p.m., just 20 minutes after I'd left the restaurant. I let it go to voicemail, then another call, then another. Text messages began flooding in, each one more urgent and angry than the last. "Where the hell are you?" Vanessa wrote. "Is this some kind of joke?" came from Peter. "Emma Jean Morgan, you get back here this instant." That was Mom, using my full name like I was still 10 years old. I turned off my phone and kept driving, no particular destination in mind. Eventually, I found myself at the beach in Revere, a place I'd come to think as a child. The night was cool but not cold, the kind of early fall evening that hinted at the winter to come without fully committing to it yet. I parked, kicked off my heels, and walked barefoot across the sand until I reached the water's edge. The tide was coming in, waves lapping gently at the shore. Above me, stars dotted the sky, barely visible through the city's light pollution. I stood there for a long time, letting the water occasionally rush over my feet, anchoring me to the moment. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. When had it all started? Not with the app sale. That had just intensified something that was already there. I'd always been the reliable one, the fixer, the one who dropped everything to help everyone else. The straight-A student who still found time to help Peter with his homework and listen to Vanessa's boyfriend problems. The dutiful daughter who visited home every weekend during college when most of my friends were enjoying their newfound freedom. The sister who loaned money she couldn't spare for emergencies that somehow always seemed to involve shopping sprees or last-minute vacations. I'd been training for the role of family ATM my entire life. The app money had just given me more to withdraw. My phone was still off when I finally returned to my car around midnight. I didn't turn it back on. Instead, I drove to a small hotel near the airport, paid cash for a room, and fell into a dreamless sleep the moment my head hit the pillow. I woke to sunlight streaming through a gap in the curtains. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then it all came flooding back. The dinner, the jokes, the escape. I reached for my phone out of habit, then stopped myself. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I showered, dressed in yesterday's clothes, and sat on the edge of the hotel bed, trying to figure out what to do next. Going home didn't seem like an option. They knew where I lived, and I couldn't face them yet. Going to work seemed impossible too. How could I stand in front of a classroom of middle schoolers and teach them about integrity when I just skipped out on a massive bill? I needed time. Time to think, time to plan, time away from the constant demands and expectations. With a sudden clarity, I knew exactly where I needed to go. 3 hours later, I was on the highway heading north, my hastily packed suitcase in the trunk and a new prepaid phone on the passenger seat next to me. I'd stopped at my apartment long enough to grab some clothes, my laptop, and the emergency cash I kept in my desk drawer. No one had been waiting there, which surprised me. Perhaps they thought I'd go to a friend's house instead. My destination was a small coastal town in Maine where my grandmother had lived until her death 5 years ago. Though her cottage had been sold, the town of Harpswell held nothing but good memories for me. Summers spent collecting shells and reading books on the porch, far away from family tensions and expectations. I'd found a last-minute rental online, a tiny house that promised solitude and views of the water. It was expensive for a teacher's budget, especially with no income for the foreseeable future, but I had enough saved to last a couple of months if I was careful. The small, rational part of my brain was screaming that this was madness. I was 32 years old, with a career, an apartment, responsibilities. I couldn't just run away because of one bad dinner. But the dinner wasn't the problem. It was merely the final straw. The problem was 4 years of being used, of being valued only for what I could provide, of watching my bank account dwindle while my resentment grew. The problem was that I didn't know who I was anymore if I wasn't the person solving everyone else's problems. As I crossed the state line into Maine, I finally allowed myself to turn on the new phone and call the one person who might understand. My best friend Layla, who had been telling me for years that my family was taking advantage of me. "You did what?" Layla exclaimed after I explained what had happened. "Emma Morgan, I have never been prouder of anyone in my entire life. You're not disappointed in me?" I asked, surprised at the emotion in my voice. "Disappointed? Are you kidding? I've been waiting for you to stand up to them for years." I could hear the smile in her voice. Though I have to say, leaving them with a $3,000 bill is a bit more dramatic than I expected from my usually sensible friend. "I don't know what came over me," I admitted. "I just couldn't do it anymore." "What came over you is called self-respect," Layla said firmly. "And it's about damn time." The conversation with Layla steadied me. She promised not to tell anyone where I was, agreed to water my plants, and said she'd check on my apartment occasionally. She also warned me that my family was losing their collective minds, with multiple calls and texts to her demanding to know my whereabouts. "Your father even threatened to file a missing person report," she told me. "I had to remind him that you're a grown woman who's allowed to go wherever she wants. I may have also mentioned that if he filed a report, he'd have to explain to the police why you left." "You didn't," I gasped. "I absolutely did," she replied without an ounce of remorse. "He backed down pretty quickly after that." By early afternoon, I was pulling up to a charming blue cottage overlooking a rocky Maine beach. The rental agent had left the key in a lockbox, so there was no need to interact with anyone. I carried my suitcase inside and stood in the center of the small living room, listening to the sound of waves crashing outside and distant seagulls calling to each other. For the first time in as long as I could remember, there were no demands on my time, no expectations to meet, no problems to solve except my own. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I was completely, utterly alone, and completely, utterly free. The first few days in Harpswell passed in a blur. I slept more than I had in years, often dozing off on the small porch that faced the ocean, wrapped in a blanket against the October chill. I took long walks on the beach, collecting smooth stones and sea glass that I arranged on the cottage windowsills. I read books from the small shelf in the living room, mostly murder mysteries and romance novels left behind by previous guests. I cooked simple meals and ate them while watching the sunset over the water. I did not turn on my regular phone. I did not check my work email. I called the school on my third day away and requested emergency family leave, citing a vague personal crisis that wasn't actually a lie. The principal was understanding, if concerned, and assured me my job would be waiting when I returned. If I returned. That thought kept creeping in, unbidden. What if I didn't go back? What if I started over somewhere new, somewhere my family couldn't find me, somewhere I could be something other than dependable Emma, the family fixer, the walking ATM? It was a fantasy, of course. I loved my students too much to abandon them permanently. I loved my small apartment with its overflowing bookshelves and the maple tree outside my bedroom window. I loved the life I'd built for myself when I wasn't, letting my family dismantle it, piece by piece. On my 5th day in Maine, I finally worked up the courage to turn on my regular phone. It immediately exploded with notifications, 92 missed calls, 147 text messages, 34 voicemails, and dozens of emails. My hands shook as I scrolled through them, watching the progression from confusion to anger to panic to threats and finally to a grudging concern. The most recent messages were slightly more subdued. Emma, please just let us know you're safe. From Mom. This isn't funny anymore. We're worried. From Peter. I've always supported you, and this is how you repay me? By scaring Mom and Dad half to death? From Vanessa. There was nothing about the money, nothing about the bill I'd left them with, nothing acknowledging why I might have left. It was all about their feelings, their worry, their inconvenience. I turned the phone back off without responding to anyone. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching as stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. The rhythmic sound of waves hitting the shore was hypnotic, lulling me into a state of calm reflection. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my anger. I was angry that my family saw me as nothing more than a resource to be drained. I was angry that I'd let it happen, that I'd said yes so many times that they'd stopped expecting to hear no. I was angry at myself for not valuing my own needs, my own future, my own financial security. Most of all, I was angry that it had taken a $3,000 dinner bill to make me finally break free. I must have fallen asleep on the porch swing because I woke hours later to a stiff neck and the sound of rain pattering on the roof. As I made my way inside, a plan was beginning to form. I couldn't hide forever, but I couldn't go back to the way things were either. I needed to set boundaries, clear, firm boundaries that I would not allow to be crossed again. And the first boundary would be financial. No more loans, no more gifts, no more picking up the check. If my family wanted a relationship with me, it would have to be based on something other than what I could give them. The question was whether such a relationship was even possible. Had there ever been more between us than convenience and obligation? Had I ever been more to them than a problem solver, a reliable source of help, both practical and financial? I wasn't sure I knew the answer. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The next morning, I woke to sunshine and clarity. I turned on my laptop and did something I should have done years ago. I made a list of every dollar I'd given to my family since the app sale. The total made me feel physically ill, nearly $800,000 over 4 years. 2/3 of everything I'd made, gone to people who called me an ATM and laughed about it. I'd been so careful with the rest of my money, living in the same modest apartment, driving the same reliable car, taking one small vacation a year. I'd wanted the security of knowing I had savings, investments, a future cushion. And all the while, I'd been hemorrhaging money to family members who spent it without a second thought. No more, I decided. No more. I opened a new document and began to type out a letter to my family. I wrote and rewrote it dozens of times, trying to find the right words to explain my absence, my hurt, my new resolve. In the end, I kept it simple. I'm safe. I'm taking some time for myself. I will not be providing any more financial assistance to anyone. Please respect my need for space. I sent it as a group text to all of them, then immediately turned off my phone again, not wanting to deal with the fallout just yet. Instead, I put on my jacket and headed out for a long walk along the shore. The tide was out, revealing tide pools teeming with life. tiny crabs scuttling between rocks, sea anemones, waving gentle tentacles, periwinkles clinging to seaweed. I crouched down to watch a hermit crab make its way across a small pool, carrying its borrowed shell like the weight of the world. When danger threatened, it could simply retreat, pulling itself entirely into that protective covering until it felt safe again. If only people could do the same. But we can't hide forever, I reminded myself. Eventually, we have to emerge, face the world, move forward. By the time I returned to the cottage, my resolve had strengthened. I couldn't change my family, but I could change how I responded to them. I couldn't make them respect me, but I could demand that respect through my actions and boundaries. I couldn't undo the past, but I could shape my future. Starting today. I'd been in Maine for 10 days when the first credit card bill arrived at my apartment back in Boston. Layla texted me on my new phone to let me know. "There's an envelope that looks like it's from the restaurant," she wrote. "Want me to open it?" "Please," I replied, my heart racing. This was the moment of truth. How much damage had I actually done by walking out that night? 10 minutes later, she called. "It's $3,214.87, she said without preamble. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. It was even worse than I'd imagined. "Oh, God! Wait, there's a note attached," I heard paper rustling. "It says the bill has been paid in full by Peter Morgan." "What?" I sat down hard on the cottage sofa. "Your brother paid the bill, Em." I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Peter, who had borrowed over $200,000 from me in the past 4 years for various business opportunities that never seemed to materialize, had paid a $3,200 restaurant bill? "That doesn't make any sense," I said finally. "Peter doesn't have that kind of money." "Apparently he does," Layla replied. "Or at least enough for this." The implications hit me like a wave. If Peter could afford to pay that bill, what did that say about all the money he'd borrowed from me? What did it say about all of them? The anger that had begun to subside flared up again, hot and overwhelming. Had they been lying to me all this time? Had I been funding their luxuries while they secretly had money of their own? I thanked Layla for checking and hung up, then sat staring at the wall for a long time. Outside, the sky darkened as storm clouds rolled in from the ocean. It matched my mood perfectly. That evening, as rain lashed against the windows and wind howled around the cottage eaves, I finally turned on my regular phone again. The barrage of messages had slowed, but there were still plenty of recent ones. I scrolled past most of them until I found what I was looking for. A text from Peter sent 2 days ago. "I paid the restaurant bill. You're welcome. Call me when you're done with this childish tantrum." The condescension in those words made my blood boil. Childish tantrum? Is that what he thought this was? Before I could stop myself, I was hitting the call button. He answered on the second ring. Well, well, the prodigal sister returns. "Where did you get $3,200 to pay that bill, Peter?" I asked without preamble. He hesitated, just long enough to confirm my suspicions. "I had some money set aside." "Set aside," I repeated, "while you were asking me for loans." "That's different," he said defensively. "That was for business. And where did the money for the bill come from? More business funds?" Another pause. "Look, Emma, I don't have to explain my finances to you." "Actually, you do," I shot back. "When you've taken over $200,000 from me in the past 4 years, you absolutely do have to explain your finances to me." "Taken?" His voice rose. "You offered. You were always so eager to help, to be the big successful sister with her tech money. Don't try to act like we forced you." The truth in his words stung. But I pushed past it. "You're right. I did offer, and that was my mistake. But it doesn't change the fact that you had money all along, that all of you probably did." "It wasn't like that," he said, but there was a defensive note in his voice that told me I was right. "Wasn't it? Tell me something, Peter. If I hadn't sold the app, would you all still want me around? Would I still get invited to family dinners if there wasn't a chance I'd pick up the check? That's not fair. No, I agreed. It's not fair at all. We were both silent for a long moment, the weight of years of deception and self-deception hanging between us. "Where are you?" he finally asked, his voice softer. "Somewhere I can think," I replied. "Somewhere I can figure out who I am when I'm not solving everyone else's problems." I need to go, Peter. Tell everyone I'm safe, but I need more time." I hung up before he could respond, then turned the phone off again and sat in the darkness of the cottage, listening to the storm rage outside. It matched the tumult in my heart, anger and hurt swirling together with confusion and a strange sense of liberation. The truth was beginning to emerge, and while it was painful, there was freedom in finally seeing things clearly. The storm passed overnight, leaving behind a pristine morning with air so clear it almost hurt to breathe it in. I took my coffee, onto the porch, and watched as the sun rose over the ocean, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. A perfect Maine October day was unfolding, crisp and bright with possibility. I had been in Harpswell for 2 weeks now, and for the first time since arriving, I felt the stirrings of something like peace. Not happiness, not yet, but a quiet acceptance of where I was and what I needed to do next. My phone, my real phone, sat on the table beside me. I had turned it on, but silenced the notifications. It was time to start dealing with reality again, one small piece at a time. I scrolled through the latest messages. My mother wanted to know when I was coming home. Vanessa was oscillating between concern and irritation. My father had sent a single text. "This has gone on long enough. Call us." None of them acknowledged my declaration about no more financial help. None of them seemed to understand that something fundamental had changed. As I sat contemplating my next move, a new email notification popped up from Rachel Chen, a former colleague who now worked for an educational technology firm in San Francisco. "Hey, stranger," the email began. "I know it's been a while, but I've been following your work with the middle school STEM program, and I'm impressed. We're looking for someone to head up a new educational initiative here, and your name immediately came to mind. Any interest in hearing more? The pay is competitive, and San Francisco is beautiful this time of year." I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold beside me. San Francisco, 3,000 miles away from Boston, from my family, from everything familiar. It was ridiculous to even consider it. I had a life in Boston, students who counted on me, an apartment, friends like Layla. But I also had a family that saw me as nothing more than a resource, a bank account that was significantly depleted, and a growing realization that maybe a fresh start was exactly what I needed. Before I could talk myself out of it, I typed a quick reply. "Rachel, great to hear from you. I'd love to know more about this opportunity." As I hit send, I felt a strange lightness in my chest, as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had suddenly lifted. San Francisco might not be the answer, but the mere possibility of something new, something entirely mine, felt like oxygen after years of slowly suffocating. For the first time since the night at Le Ciel, I allowed myself to think not just about what I was leaving behind, but what might be waiting ahead. The call with Rachel later that day only intensified my interest. The position sounded perfect, developing programs to bring technology education to underserved schools, with both classroom and administrative components. The salary was nearly twice what I made as a teacher, and the company would help with relocation costs. "We'd need you to start in January," Rachel said. "I know it's asking a lot to move across the country on relatively short notice." "Actually," I said, surprising myself, "January would be perfect." After we hung up, I sat on the porch swing, watching the afternoon sun sparkle on the water. Was I really considering this? Leaving everything behind and starting fresh in a new city? The idea was terrifying. It was also exhilarating. I spent the rest of the day making lists, pros and cons, logistics, finances. The more I thought about it, the more possible it seemed. I could sublet my apartment. I could say goodbye to my students properly and help find a good replacement. I could maintain my friendship with Layla through visits and video calls, and my family. Well, that was more complicated. But maybe distance was exactly what we needed. Maybe seeing me only occasionally would help them value those occasions more. Maybe they would finally see me as a person, not a resource. Or maybe they wouldn't. And maybe that would be valuable information too. Painful, but clarifying. By evening, I had made up my mind to at least pursue the opportunity. I wrote back to Rachel asking for the formal application materials. Then I did something even more decisive. I booked a flight back to Boston for 3 days from now. It was time to face my family, my job, my life. Time to start making real decisions, not just hiding from the fallout of one impulsive moment. As the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I felt a strange mix of sadness and anticipation. My time in this cottage had been a gift, a pause, a chance, to breathe and think and find myself again, but it couldn't last forever. Reality was waiting, and for the first time in weeks, I felt ready to meet it. I spent my last days in Maine soaking in every moment, the way the morning light filtered through the pine trees, the sound of waves. At high tide, the taste of fresh lobster from the nearby dock. I walked for miles along the shore, collecting one perfect shell to take with me as a reminder of this time, this clarity, this turning point. On my final evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset, and made one last decision. I turned on my regular phone, ignored the dozens of new notifications, and composed a group text to my family. I'm coming home on Thursday. I'd like to meet with everyone Friday evening to talk. My apartment, 7 p.m. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then turned the phone off again without waiting for responses. They would come or they wouldn't. Either way, I would say what needed to be said. The flight back to Boston the next day was smooth and uneventful. As the plane began its descent, I looked out the window at the familiar skyline, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. This had been my home for my entire life. I loved this city, its history, its energy, its changing seasons. The thought of leaving it brought a lump to my throat, but I also felt a surprising lightness as the wheels touched down. I had left Boston 2 weeks ago confused and angry, fleeing a situation I couldn't handle. I was returning clear-eyed and determined, ready to take control of my life again. Layla was waiting for me at the arrivals gate, holding a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home, brave heart." I laughed when I saw it, then surprised both of us by bursting into tears as she pulled me into a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered into my hair. "For running away?" I asked, wiping at my eyes. "For finally standing up for yourself," she corrected, "and for coming back to face the music instead of moving to Maine permanently, which, honestly, I was a little worried you might do." "I considered it," I admitted as we walked toward the parking garage. "But I also might be moving to San Francisco." Instead, her eyes widened. "Excuse me, what?" By the time we reached my apartment, I had told her everything. About the job offer, about my tentative plans, about my decision to meet with my family the next day. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" she asked as she helped me carry my suitcase upstairs. "They're going to be furious." "Probably," I agreed. "But I'm done hiding. I need to say my piece, and then they can decide what happens next." "And if they don't like what you have to say?" I thought about it as I unlocked my apartment door. The place smelled slightly stale after 2 weeks of being closed up, but otherwise it was exactly as I'd left it. Books on the coffee table, half-dead plant on the windowsill, despite Layla's best efforts, morning light streaming through the eastern windows. "If they don't like what I have to say," I replied slowly, then that tells me everything I need to know about our relationship, and it makes my decision about San Francisco a lot easier. Layla nodded, understanding, lighting her eyes. Well, whatever happens, I'm in your corner, and I expect regular FaceTime calls from California if that's where you end up. After she left, I spent the day putting my apartment in order, catching up on mail, and preparing what I wanted to say to my family. Around mid-afternoon, I finally checked the responses to my text about meeting. We'll be there, from my mother. About time, from my father. Fine, from Vanessa. See you then, from Peter. Short, non-committal, giving nothing away. But they were coming. That was something. I slept poorly that night, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say, all the hurt and anger I'd been carrying. When morning came, I felt exhausted but resolute. Today would mark the beginning of a new relationship with my family, or possibly the end of our relationship altogether. Either way, there was no going back to the way things had been. The day passed both too quickly and too slowly. I cleaned my already clean apartment. I bought snacks and drinks, then wondered why I was bothering to provide refreshments for this particular confrontation. I rehearsed what I wanted to say, then decided to speak from the heart instead of following a script. At 6:55 p.m., the buzzer rang. They were here, all of them, arriving together as if they'd coordinated beforehand. Probably they had, plotting their approach, their defense, their counterattack. I took a deep breath and buzzed them in. Their footsteps on the stairs sounded like an approaching army. Then they were at my door, Mom and Dad in front, Vanessa, and Brad behind them, Peter bringing up the rear. No sign of Aunt Melissa or any of the other extended family members who had benefited from my generosity over the years. Small mercies, Emma, my mother said stiffly as they filed in. Mom, I replied, equally formal. Dad, everyone, thank you for coming. They arranged themselves awkwardly around my small living room, my parents taking the couch, Vanessa and Brad, the armchairs, Peter leaning against the wall near the window. I remained standing, suddenly glad for the slight physical advantage it gave me. Well, my father said, after an uncomfortable silence, you've had your little vacation. Are you ready to rejoin the real world now? The dismissive tone in his voice, the implication that my legitimate emotional crisis was nothing more than a childish escape, strengthened my resolve. Actually, I said calmly, I've been in the real world all along. The real world where actions have consequences, where you can't expect someone else to continuously bail you out, where relationships are supposed to be based on more than what one person can give another. Is that what you think of us? My mother asked, her voice tight with hurt or anger. I couldn't tell which. That we only want you for your money? I think, I said carefully, that over the past 4 years, I've given this family nearly $800,000. I think that every time we get together, there's a new request, a new problem that only money, my money, can solve. I think that when Vanessa called me an ATM at that dinner, she was only saying out loud what all of you have been demonstrating through your actions for years. Oh, come on, Vanessa scoffed. It was a joke. You're being overly sensitive. I crossed my arms. Peter, you paid that restaurant bill. Where did that money come from? He shifted uncomfortably. I had some money set aside. Set aside, I repeated, while you were asking me for loans. That was different. No, I cut him off. It wasn't different. None of this is different. You've all been taking from me. For years, assuming I'd always say yes, never considering that maybe I had my own plans for that money, my own future to think about. We're family, my father said, as if that explained everything. Family helps family. Yes, I agreed. Family helps family, but it's supposed to go both ways. When was the last time any of you helped me? When was the last time any of you even asked if I needed help, or how I was doing, or what my dreams were? The silence that followed was deafening. That's what I thought, I said softly. Brad cleared his throat. Look, Emma, I understand you're upset, but walking out on a dinner bill? That was irresponsible and, frankly, illegal. You're right, I conceded. It was, and I'm not proud of it. But it was also the only way I could think of to make you all finally see me, to make you understand that I'm not an endless resource, to be drained. I'm a person with my own needs and limits. So what now? My mother asked. You've made your point. We'll be more considerate of your feelings in the future. I shook my head, recognizing the non-apology for what it was. It's not about being considerate of my feelings. It's about fundamental respect. And it's about this. I took a deep breath. I will not be providing any more financial assistance to anyone in this family. Not loans, not gifts, not investment opportunities, nothing. The explosion was immediate and fierce. After everything we've done for you, my father thundered. This is how you repay us for supporting you all these years? My mother cried. You selfish bitch, Vanessa spat. Only Peter and Brad remained silent, watching the chaos unfold with unreadable expressions. I let them rage, their words washing over me like waves against a rock. When the initial outburst subsided, I spoke again, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. I've also been offered a job in San Francisco. I'm strongly considering taking it. That silenced them. San Francisco? My mother repeated, as if I'd said Mars. When? Peter asked, the first direct question any of them had posed. January, I replied. It's a good opportunity. Better pay, more responsibility, a chance to make a real difference in educational. Technology. But you can't just leave, Vanessa said, looking genuinely shocked for the first time. What about us? What about you? I countered. You all have your own lives, your own families, your own resources. You'll be fine without me. You might even have to be somewhat financially responsible for a change. The barb hit home. I could see it in their faces. But I wasn't done yet. I love you all, I continued, softening my tone slightly. You're my family, but the relationship we've had isn't healthy. It's not good for any of us. If we're going to have any relationship moving forward, it needs to be based on actual care and respect, not on what I can give you. And if we don't, agree to your terms? My father asked coldly. I met his gaze steadily. Then I guess I'll see you at next year's Christmas dinner, if I fly back for it. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. I was really doing this. I was really standing up to them, setting boundaries, potentially walking away from my family if those boundaries weren't respected. It was terrifying. It was also, in a strange way, exhilarating. Is that all? My mother finally asked, her voice tight. That's all, I confirmed. They filed out much as they had entered, a unified front, except now their faces were tight with anger and disbelief. No hugs, no promises to talk soon, no acknowledgement of anything I'd said. Just stiff nods and cold glares. As the door closed behind them, I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Had I just destroyed my relationship with my entire family? Possibly. But I had also, finally, stood up for myself. I had said the things that needed saying, drawn the lines that needed drawing. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. The aftermath of the family meeting was exactly what I'd expected. Silence. Complete radio silence from all of them. No calls, no texts, no emails. It was as if I'd ceased to exist the moment I'd withdrawn financial support. The silence hurt more than I'd anticipated. Despite everything, they were still my family. I had childhood memories with these people. Christmases and birthdays, vacations and family dinners that hadn't revolved around who was paying the bill. I had loved them, and part of me still did, despite the anger and hurt. But the silence also confirmed what I'd suspected all along. Without my money, I held little value to them. It was a painful truth, but a truth nonetheless, and facing it head-on was surprisingly liberating. A week after the confrontation, I formally accepted the job in San Francisco. Rachel was thrilled, and the company immediately began the process of helping me relocate. I gave notice at my school, promising to finish out the semester before leaving. I began researching apartments in the Bay Area, marveling at the astronomical rents compared to Boston, even with my substantial salary increase. Life was moving forward, rushing toward a future I'd never anticipated, but now embraced with a mixture of trepidation and excitement. The next 2 months passed in a blur of preparation. I found a tenant for my apartment, a fellow teacher who was delighted with the reasonable rent I offered. I sold furniture I didn't want to move across the country and packed the rest. I said difficult goodbyes to my students, promising to keep in touch and update them on my work in California. Through it all, the silence from my family continued, broken only once by a text from Peter just before Thanksgiving. Mom wants to know if you're coming for dinner Thursday. No apology, no acknowledgement of our last conversation. Just a practical question, as if nothing had changed. I replied simply, no. I spent Thanksgiving with Layla and her extended family instead, welcomed warmly into their chaotic celebration. As I helped her mother in the kitchen, laughing at her aunt's stories and playing with her small nieces and nephews, I realized something profound. Family didn't have to be defined by blood. It could be created, chosen, built on mutual respect and genuine care. The revelation stayed with me as December arrived, bringing with it snow and holiday decorations throughout the city. My last month in Boston. My last month at the school I'd loved. My last chance to reconcile with my family before putting an entire continent between us. But the ball was in their court now. I had said what I needed to say. I had set my boundaries. The next move had to be theirs. It came unexpectedly 2 weeks before Christmas, in the form of Peter showing up at my apartment unannounced. I was in the middle of packing books when the buzzer rang. "It's freezing out here," he said when I answered. "Can I come up?" I hesitated, then buzzed him in. Whatever he had to say, I was ready to hear it. He looked around at the half-packed apartment as he stepped inside, taking in the boxes and the bare walls where my photos had hung. "So you're really doing it," he said. "Really leaving." "Really leaving," I confirmed. "My flight's on the 2nd. He nodded, then stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, hands shoved in his coat pockets. I wanted to talk to you about everything." I gestured to the couch, one of the few pieces of furniture remaining, and sat down across from him. "I'm listening." He took a deep breath. "You were right, about all of it. The money, the taking advantage, the using you as an ATM. He looked down at his hands. "I'm sorry, Em. I'm really, really sorry." The simple apology, the first I'd received from any of them, caught me off guard. "Thank you," I said softly. "The thing is," he continued, "it was so easy to fall into. You were always so generous, so eager to help, and it became normal, expected. We stopped even thinking about it." "I know," I said. "I made it easy for you. I'm not saying I didn't play a part in it." He looked up, meeting my eyes. "But that doesn't make it right. What we did, what I did, it wasn't fair to you. And I want you to know that I get that now. Do. The others? Get it, I mean." He hesitated. "Mom and Dad are struggling with it. They genuinely don't understand why you're so upset. They raised us with this idea that family takes care of family, and in their minds, your money was family money. And Vanessa? Vanessa is Vanessa," he said with a small, sad smile. "She's angry and hurt and doesn't want to admit she did anything wrong. But she might come around eventually. Maybe." I nodded, not surprised by any of this. "And you? Why are you here, Peter?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I miss my sister," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. Because I don't want you to move to California thinking your entire family sees you as nothing but a bank account. Because, he swallowed hard, because I love you and I'm proud of you and I want to be part of your life, even if you never give me another cent. Tears sprang to my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. Peter, you don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I know I have a lot to make up for. I know trust has to be earned back. I wanted you to know. Before you left, I wiped at my eyes. Thank you for coming. It means a lot. Does it change anything? He asked, a hint of hope in his voice. About San Francisco, I mean. I shook my head. No. I need this fresh start, Peter. I need to find out who I am away from here, away from all the patterns we've fallen into. I understand. He stood, looking around the apartment one more time. Will you at least let us know when you arrive safely? Let me know? I will, I promised. At the door, he turned back. One more thing. Mom's planning Christmas dinner. The usual time, the usual place. She wanted me to tell you that you're welcome. No strings attached. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. Her words, not mine, he said with a small smile. But for what it's worth, I think she means it, as much as she's capable of meaning it anyway. After he left, I sat among my half-packed belongings, thinking about his visit, his apology, the invitation to Christmas dinner. Was it a first step toward healing or just another manipulation? I genuinely couldn't tell. But I did know one thing. I wanted to see them once more before I left. Not to fall back into old patterns, not to be pulled back into their orbit, but to say a proper goodbye. To leave things, if not resolved, at least acknowledged. I texted Peter later that evening. Tell Mom I'll be there for Christmas. And Peter, thank you for coming today. His response was immediate. Merry early Christmas, Em. See you soon. Christmas Day dawned clear and cold, a perfect New England winter day with fresh snow coating the ground and bare tree branches. I dressed carefully in a new green dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, my armor in a way, a visual reminder to myself and to them that I wasn't the same Emma they'd known. I debated bringing gifts, finally deciding on small, thoughtful items rather than the expensive presents they might have expected in the past. A rare book on architecture for my father, a luxurious scarf I'd knitted myself for my mother, a framed photo of Vanessa and me as children for my sister, a bottle of good scotch for Brad, and for Peter, a first edition of his favorite novel found in a small bookshop. Meaningful gifts, not extravagant ones. A statement in itself. The familiar drive to my parents' house in the suburbs was both comforting and anxiety-inducing. How many Christmas mornings had I made this same journey? How many family gatherings had ended with me feeling drained, used? Less than. This would be different, I promised myself. I was different. My mother answered the door, her face a careful mask of politeness. Emma, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Mom, I replied, stepping inside and breathing in the familiar sense of pine and cinnamon and roasting turkey. The house looks beautiful. And it did. Decorated to magazine perfection as always, every surface gleaming, every ornament placed just so. My mother had always excelled at appearances. The others were already in the living room. My father with his traditional Christmas morning scotch, Vanessa and Brad on the love seat, Peter by the window. No extended family this year, I noticed. Perhaps they hadn't wanted witnesses to whatever might unfold. Emma's here, my mother announced unnecessarily as we entered the room. A chorus of stilted, Merry Christmas greetings followed. Only Peter's seemed genuinely warm. I took a deep breath and placed my small stack of presents under the tree, which was, as always, already overflowing with elaborately wrapped packages. Merry Christmas, everyone. It's good to see you. The ice broken, we settled into the familiar Christmas routine, Drinks and casual conversation, followed by present opening, followed by dinner. The conversation was careful, focusing on safe topics: the weather, a new restaurant in town, a movie everyone had seen. No mention of my imminent departure, no reference to our last meeting, no discussion of money or loans or expectations. It was superficial but civil, which was more than I had hoped for. The gift exchange brought moments of genuine warmth. My father seemed touched by the rare architecture book, running his fingers over the cover with appreciation. My mother exclaimed over the softness of the scarf, wrapping it around her neck immediately. Vanessa smiled, actually smiled, at the childhood photo, and Peter's eyes widened with genuine surprise when he unwrapped the first edition. "How did you find this?" he asked, turning the book over in his hands with reverence. "I have my ways," I replied with a small smile. Their gifts to me were similarly thoughtful: a beautiful leather journal from my parents, a cashmere sweater. From Vanessa and Brad, and from Peter, a small wooden box containing a collection of seashells. "From Harpswell," he explained when I opened it. "I drove up there last weekend. Thought you might want a piece of Maine to take with you to California." The gesture brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. "It's perfect." Dinner was delicious as always, my mother's culinary skills on full display. The conversation flowed more easily now, warmed by good food and the exchange of meaningful gifts. There was even laughter at times, reminiscences of Christmases past, stories we all knew by heart but enjoyed retelling. It felt almost normal, almost like the family I remembered from before the money, before the expectations, before the rift. It was only as dessert was being served that my father finally addressed the elephant in the room. "So," he said, setting down his wine glass. "San Francisco." The table fell silent. "Yes," I said calmly. "I leave in a week." "And there's nothing we can say to change your mind?" my mother asked, a hint of her old manipulative tone creeping in. "Mom," Peter warned. "It's a fair question," she defended herself. "It's not about changing my mind," I said carefully. "It's about what's best for me right now. This opportunity, this fresh start, it's what I need." "We need you too," Vanessa said suddenly, surprising me. "I know we haven't shown it well, but we do." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, seeing past the perfect hair and makeup to the uncertainty in her eyes. "I need to know that you need me for me, Vanessa. Not for what I can give you or do for you." She flinched slightly but nodded. "I understand that. I'm trying to understand that. That's all I can ask," I said softly. My father cleared his throat. "Will you come back? For visits, I mean." "Yes," I said, realizing as I spoke that I meant it. "Yes, I'll come back for visits. And you're all welcome to visit me in San Francisco too once I'm settled." "Even me?" Vanessa asked with a small tentative smile. "Even you," I confirmed, returning the smile. "As long as you don't expect me to fund a shopping spree on Rodeo Drive." She laughed, a genuine laugh without malice. "Deal." After dinner, as everyone moved back to the living room for coffee, Peter pulled me aside. "Thank you for coming today," he said quietly. "It means a lot, to all of us, even if they can't quite say it." "Thank you for making it possible," I replied. "Your visit. It opened a door I thought had closed permanently." He nodded. "It's going to take time, Em. They're not going to change overnight. Neither am I, probably." "I know. But we're trying. I'm trying. And maybe that's enough for now." As I drove home that night, the stars bright in the clear winter sky, I felt a profound sense of peace settling over me. The day hadn't been perfect. There had been awkward moments, old patterns threatening to reassert themselves, unspoken tensions simmering beneath the surface. But there had also been genuine connection, small steps toward understanding, a foundation that might support a healthier relationship in the future. I wasn't naive enough to think that one Christmas dinner had fixed everything. My family's issues ran deep, as did mine. The patterns we'd established over years wouldn't disappear overnight. Trust, once broken, took time and consistent effort to rebuild. But for the first time in months, I felt hopeful. Hopeful that my family could learn to see me as more than a resource. Hopeful that I could learn to set and maintain healthy boundaries. Hopeful that distance might actually bring us closer in the ways that mattered. As I pulled into my apartment, building's parking lot, my phone buzzed with a text from Peter. "Safe travels next week. Call when you land. We'll be thinking of you." Simple words, but they brought tears to my eyes. "I will," I texted back. "Merry Christmas, Peter. Thank you for everything." 1 week later, I stood in the departure terminal at Logan Airport, my life packed into 2 suitcases and a carry-on. Layla was with me, determined to see me off properly, despite the early hour. "You're sure about this?" she asked for the 100th time. "San Francisco is so far away, and they have earthquakes," I laughed. "I'm sure, and Boston has blizzards, so I think I'll survive the occasional earthquake." "And your family? You're okay with how things stand?" I considered the question seriously. The week since Christmas had brought a few more small steps. A lunch with Peter, a surprisingly civil phone call with my mother, a text from Vanessa asking for my new address so she could send mail once I was settled. "I think we're in a better place than we were," I said finally. "Not perfect, not even good yet, but better. And that's something." "It is," she agreed, pulling me into a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you, Em, for standing up for yourself, for making this leap, for everything." "I couldn't have done it without you," I told her honestly. "You've been more family to me than my actual family these past few years. Always will be," she promised, "no matter how many miles are between us." As I boarded the plane an hour later, I thought about family, the one I was born into and the one I had created for myself over the years. I thought about the dinner at Le Ciel that had changed everything, about the cottage in Maine where I'd found myself again, about the confrontation in my apartment and the tentative peace of Christmas dinner. I thought about the complex web of love, obligation, resentment, and hope that bound me to the people who shared my blood, and the equally complex but somehow clearer bonds that connected me to those I had chosen to love. As the plane accelerated down the runway, Boston falling away beneath me, I felt not sadness, but a profound sense of possibility. I wasn't running, away from my problems or my family. I was running toward something new, something that was entirely mine. Whatever happened next, with my family, with my career, with my life, I would face it on my own terms. No longer an ATM, no longer a pushover, no longer defined by what I could give others, just Emma. Finally, wholly, completely myself. And as the plane broke through the clouds into the clear blue sky above, I smiled at the thought of what that might mean. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of my small but perfect apartment in San Francisco's Mission District, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and pink. The air was warm for March, a welcome change from Boston's lingering winter. My new life was taking shape around me, a job I loved that challenged and fulfilled me, new friends who knew nothing of my past and accepted me as I was, a city that offered endless opportunities for exploration and discovery. And my family? We were finding our way, slowly but steadily. Weekly phone calls with Peter had become a comfortable routine. My mother's emails, once stiff and formal, had gradually softened into something approaching warmth. Vanessa had even visited for a weekend, her behavior so respectful of my boundaries that I'd barely recognized my entitled sister in this new, more considerate version. There had been no requests for money, no hints about financial help, no expectations beyond my time and attention. Whether the change was permanent remained to be seen, but for now, it felt like progress. My phone buzzed with a text from Layla. "Happy 3-month California anniversary. Still no regrets?" I smiled as I typed my response, watching as the last sliver of sun disappeared beyond the Golden Gate Bridge. No regrets, only gratitude. And it was true. Gratitude for the crisis that had forced me to confront the unhealthy patterns in my life. Gratitude for the courage to walk away from a restaurant bill, from financial exploitation, from a version of myself that no longer served me. Gratitude for the chance to begin again. As darkness fell over the city, lights twinkling to life in windows across the bay, I thought about that night at Le Ciel when my family had laughed and called me their ATM. At the time, it had felt like an ending. Now I understood it had actually been a beginning.